All right, ladies, welcome back tonight. I'm super excited to have RobertSchwartz back with us. Robert, thank you so much for participating with us again. It's always great to have you and your expertise here. For those of you, and I know you guys have heard me reference Robert before, but for those of you that don't know, he is an author of Your Soul's Plan, Your Soul's Gift, and Your Soul's Love. He's also, he's not just an author, he's a hypnotherapist, and he specializes in life between lives, soul regression. So exciting stuff. Really great information. I hope you guys have your healing notebook so you can write down pieces that resonate with you so that you can go back and really marinate in it, because this is some amazing information that he brings forth that he's gotten firsthand. So it's totally awesome. Robert, thank you so much for being back with us. I'm just going to kind of hand the reins over to you, and I'm going to sit back and soak it all in.
All right. Well, thank you, Nikki, for having me back. A pleasure to be with all of you. Wave if you can hear me. Okay, good. I want to get a sense of who is here. Nikki, has everybody here lost a child?
Yes, everybody here they have children in spirit, either one or more. Some have more, some have one. We also have some spouses and children in spirit. So
okay. And yeah. Raise a hand, please, if you lost a child to suicide. Okay. Well, I'm going to keep the presentation relatively short because I think it will be more helpful and healing to all of you just to open it up for questions and discussion. As Nikki said, I'm the author of 3 books, Your Soul's Plan, Your Soul's Gift, and Your Soul's Love. There's a website at yoursoulsplan.com where you can actually read large parts of all 3 books for free. And I would encourage you to sign up for the email newsletter on the homepage. That will keep you informed about everything we do. So the path for me to writing these books started in Chicago back in the year 2003. And at that time, believe it or not, I was actually self-employed as a marketing and communications consultant, basically doing different kinds of corporate writing. I did not enjoy that at all. It was very unfulfilling. And more to the point, I had this nagging sense that I'd come to Earth to do something else, but I didn't know what it was. And I didn't know how to figure out what it was. And so I tried various conventional routes to solve this. You could call it an existential crisis. And none of these conventional routes were helpful at all. And so in May of 2003, almost out of desperation, I did something I had never done before. I had a session with a psychic medium. Now, I wasn't even sure if I believed in mediumship at that time, but nothing else was helping. And I thought, well, why not? I'll invest an hour of my time, and if nothing comes out of it, there's really no harm done. So I did this on May 7 of 2003. The reason I remember the date is that this was the day on which my life changed. The medium started the session by saying, your spirit guides are here. And I said, what is a spirit guide? I mean, I'd never even heard the term before. So she explained that. And then she said, your guides would like to speak directly with you. And she started to channel them. The very first thing they said to me right out of the box was, you planned your life, including your biggest challenges, before you were born. And I will tell you, I just shook my head and I said, well, why in the world would I have done that? And they said, you did this for purposes of spiritual growth. Now, what was really compelling about this is that they then launched into this very lengthy and detailed monologue in which they went through all of my big challenges one by one and explained to me why I had planned them before I incarnated. And what was so compelling about this monologue was that they knew what all of my challenges had been without me telling them anything about myself, nor had I told the medium anything prior to the session. So as you can imagine, if you're talking to beings who know literally everything about you without you telling them anything, that gives them a lot of credibility. So when they started talking about this idea of pre-birth planning, I was listening very, very closely. Now, I can't overstate to you the impact that this perspective had on me. I thought about this constantly in the days and weeks after the session with the medium, and the impact that it had was that it created quite a deep healing because it allowed me for the first time to see deeper meaning to the most difficult things that had happened in my life. And then I thought, well, if this perspective can create this kind of healing for me, then surely it can create a similar kind of healing for other people. That was when I first started to think about writing a book on the subject. Now, within just a few weeks of the session with the medium, two other very important things happened. The first was I was introduced to a woman who has the ability to go into trance and channel her higher self, her soul. So I told her I'm thinking of writing a book about how we plan our lives before we're born. And I said, may I speak to your soul about this subject of pre-birth planning? Fortunately for me, she agreed. She and I got together 5 times for a total of about 15 hours. And in this 15 hours of channeling, this huge volume of information came forward that verified everything my guides had said through the medium, but then expanded upon it greatly. So her soul told me in detail how pre-birth planning works, which challenges had been discussed for her, which ones had been chosen and why, which ones had not been chosen and why not. And so again, this huge volume of information came forward that in many ways served as the foundation for all the books I eventually went on to write. And at about the same time, a third very important thing happened. And this was really the most important of the 3 things. I had what is sometimes called a spiritually transformative experience, or STE for short. Within just a few weeks of the session with the medium, and while this channeling was going on, I was home in my apartment in Evanston, Illinois, where I lived at the time. It was the middle of the afternoon on a weekday, and I was just having an average work day. I decided to take a break and go for a walk. So I'm walking down the street in Evanston when all of a sudden, every time I looked at another person, this feeling of pure, overwhelming, unconditional love for that person washed over me. And when I say pure, unconditional love here, those are the words in English that get closest to this feeling, but there really are no words that even begin to describe it. All I can tell you, it was not a human love, it was a divine love, and it was a transcendent experience. I remember it very clearly because the first person I saw after this started to happen was a cab driver. He was just sitting behind the wheel of his cab waiting for a customer to come along. And I looked at this man who, of course, was a total stranger to me and just felt this pure, overwhelming, unconditional love for him. And then I looked up and I saw a man's barber shop on the corner. I looked through the window and I saw the barber cutting customer's hair. Again, 2 total strangers. But as I looked at them, there again was this feeling of pure, overwhelming, unconditional love. And then I turned around and I saw a young woman, a mother, pushing an infant in a stroller down the sidewalk. And as I looked at them, there again was this feeling of pure, overwhelming, unconditional love. Everywhere I looked, every time I saw another person, this feeling washed over me. Now, I had never heard of anything like this or read about anything like this, but I understood intuitively what was happening, which was I was in some kind of enhanced immediate communion with my own soul. In other words, it's as though my soul were saying to me, this love is who you really are. This is your true nature. And I believe that my soul gifted me with that experience that day, because a couple of years later, by that time, I had looked at a number of people's pre-birth plans for my first book, Your Soul's Plan. And what I found was that every pre-birth plan, without exception, no matter what was being planned, was based on complete unconditional love for every single person involved. This was true even when great challenges were being planned. It was true even when negative roles were being scripted for people. It was always based on complete unconditional love for every person involved. And then I realized, that experience I had walking down the sidewalk a couple of years ago, that was gifted to me so that when I found this result in my research, I would be absolutely certain that what I was finding was true. It's because of that experience walking down the sidewalk that day that I can sit before you this evening and say to you with complete confidence and absolute certainty that I believe that we as souls are made literally from the energy of unconditional love, because that was my experience walking down the street that day. So there was this confluence of events, the session with the medium, that woman's channeling of her higher self, and the other event that I just described to you. And the combination of all of these things got me to say, okay, I'll leave the corporate world and attempt to write a book about pre-birth planning. And then from there, the universe stepped in, brought me into contact with some mediums and channels who in one way or another could find out what people planned before they were born. And by working with them, I was able to research people's pre-birth plans. So if you haven't read any of the books, the format is that I interview somebody about a common life challenge. And it's all the most common things we face here. In Your Soul's Plan, there's an entire chapter about the pre-birth planning of death of a loved one. And in Your Soul's Gift, the second book, there's an entire chapter about the pre-birth planning of suicide. And among the three books, they cover pretty much every other common challenge you can think of. Then the person that I interviewed would have 1, 2, or sometimes 3 sessions with the mediums and channels in which we ask Spirit, did this person plan this experience before he or she was born, and if so, why? And then I present all the information that came through. So the intentions of the work are to help people awaken, by which I mean come into some sense that you are a holy, eternal soul, not just an embodied personality. A second intention is to help people heal from their biggest challenges. And the third intention is to help them understand the deeper spiritual meaning and purpose of those challenges. The understanding of the deeper purpose is, in fact, a large part of the healing. So that, in a nutshell, is how the 3 books came to be. And then the work has evolved quite a bit since then. Several years after my first couple of books came out, I met my current wife, who is a channel. She channels a group consciousness, a collective we call the Beings of Light, or BOL for short. They exist in a state of unity consciousness, and she's become a full partner in my work. So we're now writing a 4th book together, which will be partly channeled material from the Beings of Light. And she co-teaches a lot of the workshops with me, which both of us enjoy very, very much. And I think it's a much stronger offering than either one of us could do by ourselves. Just to give you a quick feel for the kinds of workshops we offer, the fundamental workshop is called Awakening to Your Life Purpose, Discovering Your Life Plan. It contains a group between lives soul regression, which is the kind of hypnosis I practice. That can be done in a private session, but it works just as well in an online workshop in a group. In that kind of hypnosis, you go into a trance state and you speak directly with your council of elders. These are the beings who oversee your personal evolution, and they can answer literally any question you ask them about your life. So when you get in front of your council, that is potentially a life-changing experience. Sometimes that's a 1-day workshop, sometimes it's 2 days. There's another one called Star Souls, which is for people who sense intuitively that they come from a faraway place. It's usually a much more highly evolved civilization. And so Star Souls tend to feel out of place on Earth. They find Earth to be nonsensical and sometimes even barbaric. There's a longing for home, even though they don't remember where home is. And so in the Star Souls workshop, it's again based on hypnosis. We take you into a trance state in which you speak directly with spirit and can find out, where do you originate from? Why did you come here? What are your unique star soul gifts, and how can you activate them in service to humanity? There's actually a Star Souls workshop this coming Sunday on December 4th. There's a Between Lives workshop on December 17th. And in January, there's an empath workshop and a higher self workshop. Higher self workshop brings you into greater contact with your higher self so that you can receive more in the way of guidance and inspiration. I want to talk briefly about suicide. And I know Nikki has shared this with you, but it's so important that I think it's worth going over again. This comes from the suicide chapter in my second book, Your Soul's Gift. And let me set the stage here. The person who is the focus of that chapter is an American woman named Carolyn. She lost her only child, a son named Cameron, to suicide just a few days after he graduated from high school. So this was at a time in Cameron's life when she thought he was about to go off to college, start doing great and exciting things in the world. And instead, she came home one day, found that he had hung himself from a rafter in their attic, and she was the one who had to climb up there, cut the rope, and take the body down. So she and I worked with a channel in the Netherlands who channels Jesus. And toward the beginning of the channeling session, I asked Jesus, is suicide planned before we're born? And he says, it is never planned as a certainty, but it is planned as a possibility, a probability, or rarely a probability so high as to be almost certain. And then he explains that was the case with Cameron. Cameron had brought back into body unhealed energies from past lives for the purpose of healing them. And he did this to such an extent that it created extreme depression and anxiety. Now, he knew before coming to body that it would do that and make a suicide highly likely. You might ask, why in the world would any soul create a life plan in which a suicide is highly likely? Well, some souls, for lack of a better word, are very ambitious. They want to wrap up or do a lot in one lifetime. And also, you have to keep in mind that if you don't fulfill your pre-birth intentions in a particular incarnation, from the human perspective, that might be viewed as a failure, but your soul has no such judgment. The soul does not look at that as a failure. The soul does not judge you in any way. The soul's only reaction to that is a feeling of incompletion and a desire for another incarnation in which you would complete what you set out to do, but there's no judgment at all. So Cameron is one of these ambitious souls, and he brought back into body all of these unhealed energies in order to attempt to heal them. So Jesus explains this, and then he steps aside, and Cameron comes in. And he speaks in a very poignant way directly to his mother. And essentially the message he gives her is, this is not your fault. It was my decision. It was my responsibility and my responsibility alone. You are not to blame in any way, and no one else is to blame in any way. That, by the way, is the most common message from people who have taken their lives when they're contacted through a medium or channel. They always say, this was my decision, my responsibility, nobody else is to blame in any way. So Cameron and his mother, Carolyn, talk for a while, and then Cameron steps aside and Jesus comes back in. And he then shares with me a piece of information that I consider to be perhaps the single most healing piece of information I've received in all the years I've been doing this kind of work. And essentially what he says is that every suicide that could have been prevented was in fact prevented. Now, what does he mean by that? What he means is that if a suicidal person has the slightest openness or willingness to change their mind, Spirit knows that, and then Spirit stages an intervention. The intervention could be anything. For example, maybe a bird flies by and distracts the person and they don't go through with it. Or somebody walks by, smiles at them, they feel a little bit better, and they don't go through with it. Occasionally, and I know somebody that this happened to, the intervention is much more dramatic. I know someone who, he's an Englishman, he was in the UK, young guy, I think early 20s at the time, and was, you could say, down on his luck, nothing was going well. He was suicidal. He was sitting at a train station and was having an internal debate just within his own mind, about what he felt were his only two options in life. One was to kill himself. The other was to stake out an ATM and take somebody's cash after they withdrew it from the ATM. So this young man is sitting at the train station debating in his mind between these two options, when all of a sudden a hooded figure walks up to him. It's a person wearing literally a hoodie. The hood is pulled over the head, so he couldn't see the face. The face was concealed mostly by the shadow cast by the hoodie. But this person, who it turns out was an angel who had assumed human form, walked up to him and said to him, "Those are not your only two options," so that the angel knew what he was thinking. And the angel said to him, "Don't kill yourself. Don't steal money from somebody at an ATM. There's a spiritual study center just a few blocks down the street from the train station here. Walk down there, talk to the woman who runs it, and let her direct you." So he did this. Well, it turns out I was scheduled to speak the next night at that spiritual study center. So she told him, "Why don't you come to this talk? This American author is going to be here. I think it'll be helpful to you." And he did come to the talk. And then we spoke privately for a while afterwards. And to make a long story short, the woman who runs that spiritual study center ended up taking this young man into her home for some period of weeks while he got back on his feet. And I don't know what happened after that, but I'm hopeful that he managed to turn his life around. He is still here with us in a body on planet Earth. So coming back to the channeling of Jesus in Your Soul's Gift, he explains again that if anybody is suicidal but has the slightest openness or willingness to change their mind, Spirit knows and stages some kind of an intervention. What that in turn means is that if you lost somebody you loved to suicide, there was literally nothing you could have done to prevent it. Because again, had there been an openness to change their mind, Spirit would have known, Spirit would have staged an intervention. There was literally nothing you could have done. So for those of you who raised a hand when I asked who has lost someone to suicide, I would invite you now, take any guilt or self-blame you might feel, set it down and step away from it. That's what your loved one wants for you. And again, there was literally nothing you could have done. Nikki told me before we started that some of you are working on developing your own ability to speak with your loved ones in spirit. And if you've been able to cultivate that ability and can now do that, that is a wonderful thing. But for those of you who have not yet cultivated that ability, it is possible, not just possible, it actually happens all the time, that you can speak directly with your loved ones in spirit through hypnosis. And we do that in the Awakening workshop, both the 1-day and the 2-day. In the Between Lives Soul Regression, you can ask your Council of Elders to bring in any loved ones you want to talk with. And in the 2-day Awakening workshop, we have that plus a separate regression on the first day, specifically for the purpose of connecting with loved ones on the other side. And very often people will connect with multiple loved ones on the other side, both people and pets. A lot of people will contact pets, dogs, cats, horses, and speak with them just as they speak with their former loved ones from this lifetime. So it's remarkably easy to do. And I would encourage those of you who haven't cultivated the ability to make direct contact, give hypnosis a try in one of the workshops. You might be surprised at what happens. So that is the gist of what I wanted to share with you tonight. And I'll open it up for questions now.
Robert, are the workshops done online then? I think I missed hearing. Are they online workshops?
Yeah, all the workshops are now online. They used to be only in person, but then COVID hit and
Okay.
we moved everything online, and that seems to work so well. We've just continued with them.
Okay. I have a couple questions. I do believe in the Council of Elders, and I've actually in dream state seen them for somebody else that was getting ready to pass. Is everybody's council of elders the same entities, the same beings of light, or is it different for each person, or is there just a set of beings of light like that are the set council of elders?
Now, what I've seen in my work is that it's different for each person.
Okay.
And people will have different numbers of beings on their council, and they'll have
Okay.
different beings on their council. Sometimes there are ascended masters on the council.
Okay.
Sometimes highly evolved extraterrestrial beings. Occasionally, there's a loved one from this lifetime who is now on the council, but everybody has their own.
Okay. And then I have another question. One of the things that with my own healing and my own connection to leaf, and I hadn't even considered it, but when you said that you had a spiritually transformative experience, I actually had that with my son, and he had told me, he's the one that told me to start looking at soul, what he called soul contracts. And he had told me that we had done this before, and I was the child that took the early exit, and he was the parent. We decided because of the soul growth that we would switch those places this time. But within the early stages, probably not the early stages, probably about year 3, I decided that growth and healing was like going to be the purpose of my life. And that because innately somehow I said, I feel like if I don't grow as much as what I think I probably signed up to grow, I'm probably going to come back here and want to keep growing in those ways. So I'm going to get as much done this time as I can. So, and that's actually something I use in my coaching. I'll say, like, do you want to come back and have to repeat some of these things because you signed up to learn them? So when you were talking about the incompleteness of the things that we do put in as our contrast to grow and evolve through, have you found that quite often? I know you said you found it through the people that have left body through suicide, but have you found that in general as a rule that people will reincarnate if they had lessons that they wanted? I call them lessons. If they had contrast struggles that they wanted to grow through that maybe they ignored or they didn't.
I have found that, yeah. That is one of the main reasons why people reincarnate. And it's also one of the main reasons why people plan challenges for themselves. So the way this works, as I understand it, at the end of every incarnation, you have a life review. And essentially what you're looking for in the life review is, did you do what you set out to do? And did you learn what you set out to learn? And were you of service in the ways you intended to be of service? Mm-hmm. So you see scenes from the incarnation, you review them with your guides, and you're assessing those things that I just mentioned. If you end up feeling incomplete with anything you were trying to learn or do or be of service, then that feeling of incompletion, that is karma. That's what karma is as I understand it. And so if you have that feeling of incompletion, you will most likely plan another incarnation, and the life plan will be set up so that you can complete what you didn't complete in the last incarnation.
Okay. And because that was a big thing for my healing when I was exhausted and I said, to hell with this, I'm just going to stay sad and all the things I would think. And I think it was an innate thought probably from my higher self. Do you really want to do that? Or do you want to keep going because you signed up to evolve in this way? And I was like, okay. Another thing I wanted to touch on, I heard you say, because this is part of my belief system, is that people will ask me, well, Nikki, you talk about like that you don't believe that there's a hell. And so what about like the quote unquote bad people, the evil people? And I tell them my belief is that even like Hitler signed up to play a role within this human existence to cause a shift and to be contrast for, everybody that was involved in that, and even generations and generations later. Have you found that in your studies that people do, like people that we butt heads with or that are just like a thorn in our side, or even people that commit what we consider very heinous acts, that they have signed up for that role to provide contrast for evolution of spirit? Have you found that?
I haven't researched people who like a Putin, for example, who are doing things on a large scale. So I can't speak to large scale things like that. But certainly in individual life plans, it's very, very common. You will ask another soul in your soul group, and it's somebody that you have a lot of love with and that you trust because you've worked together in many past lives. If you need somebody to play a negative role, because you view that as providing both the opportunity and the motivation to learn certain lessons, you ask somebody in your soul group that you love and trust quite a bit to play that role. And sometimes they agree readily. A lot of times they will be hesitant and they'll say, well, I don't know that I want to treat you that way. Are you sure you want to do this? And then you have to actually do a little bit of convincing to talk them into playing that role.
Okay, so that's why those people are our biggest teachers then, because they're literally providing the contrast that we evolved through. Okay.
Yeah.
That has been a big piece for me, for people that I'm like, but eventually I've been able to mostly come into forgiveness. I'm moving towards that. So, yeah. Okay. Those are all my questions. So I will not take up all the time, guys. So I'll open it up to everybody else, and you guys just, whatever you want to pick Robert's brain about. Go for it, Robin.
So I have a question. When my son, he was the first of my two to go, and I got a reading about a month after. And one thing that he said, I had to type it out so I wouldn't forget, is that he was going to go back to where he was happiest, and before basically a fork in the road, to start from there and try to correct some choices he made. Does that sound like basically like what you're explaining?
I think that is a common feeling among many people. Sometimes, the life plan just turns out to be too much for somebody, or, you have to also keep in mind, not everything is planned. There are many things that happened that weren't planned, or they were planned as low possibilities. And so some things that weren't seen as very likely to happen end up happening, and the difficulties turn out to be more than the person can handle. And so there's a feeling, perhaps at the level of the personality, perhaps at the level of the soul, perhaps both, that it would be better just to start clean and start over again. I don't think that's unusual at all.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Nikki, I know you're talking, but I can't hear you now.
I was muted. Don't be shy, guys. And you don't have to be called on. Just unmute yourself, just like we do in coaching sessions, and talk away.
I have a question. Okay, Robert, my question is this. I'm interested in what you think, because it sounds like you said that depression and anxiety and like suicide can be like past life carryovers or something.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I heard that. And then if you could elaborate on that. And then my other question is, do you believe that we have a time? You know what I mean? Like, here's my question. So I totally believe what you say, because I've literally experienced exactly what you said. I have literally hung myself and someone came and saved me. Okay, a relitter. And then the other time was another elaborate thing I won't mention. And I got saved then too by some random person. You know what I'm saying? And I was like so mad at God. I was like, why didn't you save him? He was a lot better. He was Catholic, blah, blah, blah. And I thanked you for him every day. And you did all these miracles. And of course, I got a sign like right then. And I was like, that was pretty interesting. Thank you, Lord. But then again, I always wondered, because my son shot himself. And I mean, it's kind of hard to stop somebody if they have a gun. You know what I mean? That's like a free will impulse thing. So that's my question. If you think we have a time kind of limit, and to elaborate more on depression and anxiety and from past lives.
When you say, do we have a time limit, are you asking if souls plan to exit at a certain point?
No, I just mean, like, do you believe that thing, like, if it's not your time, you're not going to pass? You're just like, the same thing could happen to one person. They make it. Somebody like comes away without
yeah,
a scratch.
my understanding is that everyone plans several exit points before they come into body. And you would take an exit point under basically one of two sets of circumstances. One is you've accomplished everything you came to do, in which case it's just time to go home. The other circumstance in which you take an exit point is basically the opposite of that. Your soul concludes, for whatever reason, you will not be able to do what you came here to do. And in that case, the soul isn't interested in wasting time or energy. The soul will end the incarnation and start another one where you can finish what you came here to do. In terms of depression and anxiety, those can definitely be caused by bringing back into body unhealed energies from past lives for the purpose of healing them. The story I shared with you about Cameron, that's not the only story like that in my books. There's a similar story in the first book, Your Soul's Plan. There's a chapter about the pre-birth planning of deafness and blindness. And the deafness story is about a young woman named Penelope. I think she was 24 at the time I spoke with her for the book. She was born completely deaf in both ears. Working with one of the mediums on the team, I was able to go into Penelope's pre-birth planning session and actually hear the conversation that had taken place when she planned the deafness. And what I found out is that in the lifetime immediately prior to this one, she had the same mother she has in this lifetime. And in that past life, when she was a little girl, she heard the mother shot to death by the mother's boyfriend. Now, she didn't actually witness the murder, but she heard the gunshots that led to her mother's death. As you can imagine, she was traumatized by that, so much so that it led her to commit suicide later in that lifetime. So she returned to spirit from that life, what you could call an energy of unhealed trauma, which now needs to be healed. In the pre-birth planning session, her spirit guide says to her, "My dear, would you prefer to be born deaf so that no similar trauma will happen to you again, and so that you can complete your healing from the last lifetime?" And then she responds, "Yes, that is what I want and what I wish to do." And what ensues at that point is a fascinating discussion between her and her guide in which they work out the details of the deafness. But the point here being, here's another soul who had unhealed energies from a past life and was bringing them back into body for the purpose of healing them. And that was such a high priority, such a focus, that she chose to be born completely deaf so that she could concentrate on that healing.
Wow. Thank you very much. You had me crying after you were talking about that. So I appreciate that. I feel better now.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I have a question. You were talking about exit points and how I just want to know your opinion. So regarding exit points, I actually have a couple questions. Do you believe that there's a certain time period, like a week or a month's period of time where a person would choose to have their exit point taken then, or are the exit points anytime throughout someone's life? Like, they could be 20 years old or 30 years old, or do you think, you know what I'm saying? Do you think that
I don't know how long exit points are there for. I don't know what the window is, so to speak. I've never looked at that. But my understanding is that everybody has several exit points, and they're planned to be staggered throughout the lifetime so that there are multiple opportunities to choose to go home if you have completed what you came to do, or you won't be able to complete what you came to do.
Okay, and I just I don't know if you can answer this, but the way of passing, is that considered in the soul's plan, the pre-birth plan?
Well, sometimes it certainly is, like the story of Cameron that I shared with you. It was foreseen that a suicide was highly likely. I don't believe that they actually discussed that he would hang himself. And my understanding is that very often that kind of detail is not discussed. There's just a general intention that this will be an exit point and it will happen sort of generally in this way. But a lot of times the specifics are left open, and those are determined by the free will choices of everybody involved.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mhm.
That brought up a question for me, Robert. A lot of moms that I've worked with, and myself included, looking back within, for some, they've had what we consider premonition, right? For me, it wasn't so much that as looking back, there were things that my son was saying that we just totally took with an earth grain of salt that was unusual. And my son did not complete suicide. But things that he was saying that had we had our awakening and our awareness at that point, we would have been like, that was a weird thing for, like, he discussed, like, he was 16 when he left body. And so he had after we had his body cremated, I was like, I don't know what to do with these ashes, right? Like, I was still in shock. And he said he came through to a friend that was connected, and he said, Tom is my boyfriend, he's my partner, and he and my son Leaf were very close, and he said, ask Tom. Tom knows what to do with them. And so I asked Tom, and I'm like, do you know what Leaf wanted done with his ashes? And he was like, no, why would I know that? And I asked him again a few days later, I said, did you guys have like a funny discussion? Ha ha, this is what I want done. Yeah, and he said, actually, we did about 3 weeks ago. And so he said they had this discussion, and then there were other things that I looked back and I was like, he kept telling me, when I turned 17, I'm going home. And I was like, you're not moving back. We had moved out of state. And I said, you're not moving back home. And he'd say, when I'm turned 17, I'm moving back home to live in Gam's basement. Well, he left body 10 days before he turned 17. So by the time he's turned 17, I'm back home with his ashes living in my mother's basement. So I'm like, I think that in my belief, that he wasn't consciously remembering it like earth side, but his soul already was aware that an exit point was coming. Have you had experience with that? Because I've had a lot of moms that I've worked with that they can look back and see kind of these things too. Some of them actually saw the death scene the day before or a month before, or some of them had even felt it from the very, like, since the birth. Have you had experience with those sorts of things?
I've heard many stories from many people confirming what you just said. I think, spirit knows when these things are going to happen. And so your non-physical guidance team, the guides, the angels, the masters who work with you, if it's for your highest good, they'll start sending you intuitive impressions that something major is going to happen or a death is going to happen. And they're just trying to prepare you and make it a little bit easier.
And we just kind of write them off because we're like, oh, that was a weird conversation. Okay, that makes sense, because it's just such a consistent thing with a lot of the parents that I work with that I'm like, there has to be something to this with with the soul plan, with the exit points, right? So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. Why is there so many more people here on Earth now than decades ago? Like, if we're reincarnating, are we reincarnating into different people as a soul? Like,
the reason there are so many people here now is that the Earth is going through an ascension process. So if you're not familiar with the term ascension, it means literally ascending or moving up, in this case, moving up in vibration or frequency. So when all of us incarnated, Earth was in what is called third density. A lot of people say the third dimension, but the correct term is actually third density. And it has since moved into fourth density. which is a much higher vibration. And it's moving into fifth density, which is a density of unconditional love and oneness consciousness. So essentially, we are going home while staying in physical bodies, if you choose to stay on the planet. So this is a monumentally big and important event. And many, many, many souls wanted to be incarnate to be a part of this. It's actually my understanding that there were 3 times as many souls who wanted to be incarnate now as available bodies. So in order to be here, you actually had to make a 1 in 3 cut. And the way that choice was made is that you had to have something specific to offer the ascension process. This is something very important for everybody to keep in mind, because I think so often we have a human tendency to feel small, weak, insignificant, powerless, helpless, and so on. Actually, nothing could be further from the truth. You had to make a 1 in 3 cut to be here now, and you were chosen specifically because you have something to offer the ascension process.
So are our kids like with you right now? Like, are they like around you right now?
I think they are around you. And if I had clairvoyant abilities, I would see them. But I'm not a medium or channel. I work with mediums and channels. But and you know, when I write, I feel like I get impressions from spirit. So I know that I'm not writing alone, but I don't consider myself to be a quote unquote medium or channel per se.
I got a question. Do you have experience with children that come in body with an illness? My son was diagnosed with cancer at 2.5, and he kind of was I automatic write with him, and he talks about how, you know, this is something we planned, and it's for my soul's growth. Is it more for like the parents when they have a child such a young transition? And is it because we've like done something wrong in past lives and now we have to go through this in this life? I don't know.
You know,
What is your experience?
I'm going to put up the whiteboard if I can, because I want to draw something for you. Is everyone seeing the whiteboard? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
So this comes from an exercise called the Divine Virtues that we do in my 2-day awakening workshop. So here's your, oh shoot, how do I draw a line? Well, now it's not letting me do what I want to do.
There, it drew it, Robert. It's lagging a little bit, but it drew it.
All right, there we go. So here's your basic graph. The x-axis is time. I'll just put a T. The y-axis is your level of consciousness. I'll just put a C. A very common pre-birth plan looks like this. You're born here. This is the level of consciousness you bring into the body at birth. And then the plan calls for you to spend a number of years doing this. So you're going along, making incremental gains in consciousness. And then the plan calls for this to happen. This point here is a pre-planned inflection point. It's most likely a life challenge you yourself planned before you were born in the hope your level of consciousness would spike up like this. The inflection point could be almost anything. But given humanity's current state of evolution, certain things are chosen much more frequently than others as inflection points. One of the most commonly chosen, and perhaps the most commonly chosen inflection point, is the death of a loved one. If it's not the death of a loved one, then very often it's an illness. And if it's an illness, very often it's cancer. And if it's not the death of a loved one or an illness, then very often it's an accident. And I'm putting accident in quote marks here because it isn't really an accident. So from a pre-birth planning perspective, you viewed the challenge, the inflection point, as providing both the opportunity and the motivation to cultivate qualities that are important to the soul. And I call these qualities divine virtues. I hear souls talk about divine virtues all the time in their pre-birth planning sessions. And over a period of years, I put together a list of the ones that came up the most often. I think there's 28 on the list now. It's things like unconditional love, compassion, empathy, patience, faith, and many others. So if a child has an illness, that's an inflection point that is intended to help you, the parent, cultivate certain virtues. So when we go through the divine virtues exercise in the online workshop, I lead people through a process that helps them figure out, it's usually the 2 or 3 virtues they're working on in this particular lifetime. And once you know which virtues you're working on, that is really valuable information to have, because number one, it will give deeper meaning to the most difficult experiences you've already had, which is very healing. But it also helps you proactively, because in the future, when new challenges come along, then instead of feeling victimized, or instead of not seeing any deeper meaning, you just remind yourself which virtues you're working on. And then you say, all right, how can I utilize this new challenge to cultivate and express those virtues?
Okay, what?
So it has the effect of immediately assigning deeper meaning to something that otherwise appears to be meaningless. That's the gist of divine virtues.
Robert, within
Mhm.
that, what you were just talking about in reference to Debbie's question, like so the inflection point, right? The inflection challenge right there in
Mhm.
Isaac's case would have been him getting, like, having cancer at such a young age. So they would have planned that in, not just for her to excel in divine virtues, but even for him to excel in divine virtues through whatever he was learning as having cancer, right?
That's
that be
correct.
correct?
Now,
Okay.
that is correct. Now, most likely they're going to be different virtues for each
Right,
person,
right.
but that is correct.
Okay. I love that we didn't get this part last time. I love that you touched on that, because I love the way that you articulate it, because this is one of the things when I teach it, I say, look for the gifts, but, and the way you just described it, I'm like, oh, the gifts are the divine virtues. Okay.
That's exactly right. Yeah,
Okay.
the main value of understanding divine virtues is that it pulls you out of victim consciousness.
Yeah.
And that's very important, because victim consciousness is literally the lowest vibration a human being can be at. And it tends to be self-perpetuating, because when you believe yourself to be a victim, you vibrate at the frequency of victim. When you vibrate at the frequency of victim, you're energetically stating to the universe that you're a victim. Well, whatever energetic statement you make to the universe, it always responds in exactly the same way. It always responds by saying, yes, that's right, you are. So if you state energetically to the universe that you're a victim, it says, yes, you are a victim, and it brings you more experiences that seem on the surface to confirm to you that you are in fact a victim. The way to break out of that negative self-perpetuating cycle is simply to understand that you are the courageous, powerful soul who planned that inflection point. And then if you take it a step further and come into some understanding of why you planned it, in other words, which virtues you're working on, that's even better, because then you can go about cultivating those virtues in a much more conscious and much less painful manner.
Yeah, I'm actually living that. And so it's kind of the basis of grow through what you go through. Everything is your teacher. It comes to
Right.
teach you, right?
That's
Yeah,
right.
awesome. I love the more profound information about those kind of cliche things that we hear, because they're universal truths, quite honestly, So
Yeah.
awesome.
So I don't consider myself a victim. I understand what you're saying about making that energetic statement to the universe, and I don't think I do that, but I also don't think I've figured out my virtues or my lessons, because those 3 things that you mentioned, I've hit all 3 of them. And I've worked really pretty hard on trying to understand things since my daughter left her body. But soon after that, I was diagnosed with cancer. And most recently, my husband almost died in a car accident. So I feel like I haven't learned a thing, and I keep trying.
Well, what I would say to you is you're definitely learning. It's not accurate. You haven't learned a thing, because the fact of the matter is, if you weren't learning anything, you wouldn't still be here. Your soul would have brought the incarnation to an end, and you would be planning a new life, or you would have started over in a new life. If you're still here in a body, you are learning. Now, maybe you're not learning as quickly as you might ideally like. Maybe you're not learning as joyfully as you might ideally like. And that's where doing this kind of spiritual growth work comes in handy, because the more awareness you have about why you're here and what you're learning, the more you can go about learning those things in a conscious way, rather than just reacting to what life throws at you.
Right.
I do have something else 1 minute from now. So any last questions or comments or anything?
Can we, in a lifetime, can we have more than one inflection point? Or is there usually just one, there's one main life changing, like you and your meeting, or?
Everybody has several inflection points. And if I had taken you through the whole divine virtues exercise, we fill out this matrix where each column heading is one of your inflection points. And most people will have at least 5 or 6. And there are some people who have 10, 12, 15.
97.
Pray that you are not that person.
There are a lot of inflection points.
You are at, this has been absolutely wonderful for me and so healing. And I don't even think that I could put into words why, but it has been incredible for me. And my son left body by suicide, and you didn't tell me anything I've never heard before, but the way you delivered it, and it might be that Jesus was here too, but it really, really, really was incredibly healing for me. That's why I was crying like Debbie from happy healing tears. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Again, I would invite all of you, come to the website, yoursoulsplan.com, sign up for the newsletter, and that will keep you informed about everything that we've got going on.
Absolutely. I knew you have to run, Robert. Thank you so much for popping on with us. It's always an amazing experience to have you here. I've already got the website posted in the private group, so they know exactly where to go. And just again, thank you. It's so healing to have your information and the way you articulate it. And it's just a great jumping off point for some of these moms, and for some of us it just reiterates the path that we've been on. So thank you so much. I hope you have amazing holidays.
Yeah, happy holidays to all of you, and thank you for having me back. It's always a pleasure, and thank you for having this group. I think what you're doing is a beautiful form of service to the world.
Thank you. I'm trying to walk in my purpose. I was drug into it kicking and screaming and fighting it, and then I just had to surrender and say, okay, just do with me what we're supposed to be doing.
Okay.
So,
bye-bye.
All right, Robert. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Robert.
Thank you,
You're
Robert.
welcome. You're welcome.
Everybody else, stay on for just 1 minute. I've got some housekeeping. He's great. I've posted the books, guys. If you haven't read them, read them. They're amazing books. Get your highlighter, get your pen, write down your truth out of it, because it is amazing stuff. I dabbled with those things very early on, and remember, you take what resonates. How do you know what resonates? What brings you peace? Because peace equals truth, right? Don't forget, Saturday, Kathy is doing oracle card pulls. I don't know if she's posted the decks or not. When she does, take a gander at those decks. The one you're pulled to is the one you want her to draw for you from. Then Sunday, we have a group reading with Marie Hess. I don't know if I know some of you that have been in the holiday program have been in with Marie before. Marie's amazing. She is amazing. She gets in flow. She stays in flow. It's good stuff. So there's not coaching this week because everybody's schedules that needed to come in and present this week, I figured I was probably the least important for you guys. So we can do coaching in the thread. I did post a thread discussion about spiritual questions, things that you want answers to, kind of like what we did tonight. If I don't know the answer, and I've studied a lot, guys, I've studied a lot of different things. If I don't have the answer, I will find the resource for you that does have it, or there will be somebody in this group that has a resource, because like Lee has done, deep dives. Kathy's done deep dives. So there's a lot of collective energy here too. So open up about those questions, because I guarantee there's going to be an answer or lead you to a resource that has the answer that you need. Okay. So I posted that one under hashtag thread discussions. You can go to the topics in the Facebook's so difficult now. You go to the featured things at the top and you go to the topics and you hit the hashtag thing and then it'll bring it down. So other than that, that's all I've got for you guys tonight. Does anybody have questions or comments before we pop off of here? For those of you guys that shared or donated to the WPU fundraiser, thank you so much. I hit Leaf's goal on his fundraiser. We have a team of about 20 that did them. And so if you participated in that, or you donated or you shared, thank you so much. That's actually going to be our annual budget for next year, so that we can help lots of families get the help they need, the healing they need, the financial stuff that they need to cover bills, or just whatever it looks like. So thank you guys for participating in that. And other than that, that's all I've got for you.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. It was really good. It
Great.
was like, I had
love
it.
goosebumps through some parts. I was like, oh my God. But yeah.
Yeah, that was incredible. Like
It
divine.
It really
appointment.
was. I agree.
Yeah.
And he brought it. He brought in more this year than when he was with us
Woo!
last time. So we went a little bit deeper, which I thought was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also recommend checking out his course. I haven't done it, but in the channel, if you sign up, he has like a free webinar, so it expands a little more on what he did now. So no obligation, but that's really amazing as well. You can watch a replay if you just sign up for it about the
Awesome.
2-day workshop.
So
That's
it's
really cool.
I posted the website, and guys, and I've got to post Michael Christopher's, but any of the presenters that we have come in like this, outside speakers or mediums, it's going to be under hashtag resources, and that's where you can find them, so you don't have to get on the Google and find all the thingies. What's up, Em?
Oh, I was going to say, let's do something fun. I will make a post in the group, and anyone who has not read his book, if you put your name under there, I'll do an automated generator, and I'll send you. I have an extra copy of his book that I'll send you.
I haven't read any
Awesome.
of his books.
They're
So
amazing.
I'll make a post, and if y'all haven't
Yeah.
read his books, put your name on there. I'll do an automated little generator thing and draw one person, and I'll mail it to you.
Cool. And that reminds me, I forgot to do last week's drawing. So this week on Sunday, please remind me, and I'll do two. So, okay, guys. I don't even know what is today, Thursday. Happy Thursday. And we'll see you Saturday and Sunday. I'll probably let Kathy handle Saturday on her own, but I'll be on Sunday with you guys. And other than that, participate in the thread discussions, get your butts in there and do gratitudes and affirmations, and keep that vibe just a little bit higher, and keep working on your truth.
Thank you.
you. See you all later. Thanks so
Have
much.
good. Give Kate a big
Bye.
well, you
Thank you.
don't hug. Tell Kate happy birthday.
Her and LaShawn hug me all the time when they're down here, just to jab at
Oh,
me.
I know
and
you hate.
I'm finally like, just do it, get it over with. So, but yeah.
All right. Thank
Okay,
you. That
guys.
was wonderful.
You're
Bye-bye.
welcome. Thanks for co-hosting him.
You're welcome.
Bye.